On a chilly autumn night, I decided to explore the long-abandoned Hawthorn Manor. Nestled deep in the woods, the manor was rumored to be haunted by the spirits of the Hawthorn family, who mysteriously disappeared one night over a century ago. Determined to uncover the truth behind the eerie legends, I armed myself with a flashlight, my camera, and a notebook. As I approached the manor, the wind howled through the skeletal trees, and the full moon cast a ghostly glow on the dilapidated structure. The front door creaked open with a foreboding groan, and I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing through the desolate hallways. Cobwebs hung like tattered curtains, and dust motes danced in the dim light. I made my way to the grand parlor, where I had heard the family's portraits still hung on the walls. As I gazed at the paintings, I felt a chill run down my spine. The eyes of the Hawthorn family seemed to follow my every move, their expressions eerily lifelike. Suddenly, a cold draft swept through the room, extinguishing my flashlight. In the darkness, I heard a faint whisper, unintelligible but unmistakably human. My heart pounded in my chest as I fumbled for my spare flashlight, finally managing to switch it on. The room was empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Determined to press on, I ventured upstairs to the bedrooms. I entered what appeared to be the master bedroom, the bed still made as if waiting for its occupants to return. On the nightstand, I found an old leather-bound diary. The pages were yellowed with age, but the ink was still legible. It belonged to Margaret Hawthorn, the matriarch of the family. As I read the diary, I uncovered a tragic tale. Margaret wrote about her husband, Thomas, who had become obsessed with dark rituals and the occult. Desperate to gain power and wealth, he made a pact with a malevolent spirit. In exchange for their souls, the spirit promised them eternal prosperity. But the spirit had deceived Thomas. Instead of granting them riches, it trapped the family's souls within the manor, condemning them to an eternity of torment. My hands trembled as I turned the final pages. Margaret's last entry described how the spirit had begun to possess Thomas, driving him to madness. On the night of their disappearance, he had locked the family in the parlor, setting the manor ablaze in a twisted attempt to free them from the spirit's grasp. But instead of release, their souls became bound to the charred remains of the manor. A sudden noise startled me from my reading. I turned to see the ghostly figure of Margaret standing in the doorway, her eyes filled with sorrow. "Help us," she whispered, her voice echoing with despair. I felt a surge of determination. I knew I had to break the curse and free the trapped souls. Remembering the dark rituals Thomas had practiced, I realized I needed to find and destroy the artifacts he had used to summon the spirit. I made my way to the basement, where I discovered a hidden chamber. The walls were lined with arcane symbols, and in the center of the room stood an altar adorned with sinister relics. With trembling hands, I gathered the artifacts and placed them in a circle on the floor. I chanted the words I had read in the diary, invoking the spirit's presence. The room grew cold, and the shadows seemed to come alive. The spirit materialized before me, a grotesque figure shrouded in darkness. "You cannot free them," it hissed, its voice a chilling whisper. "They belong to me." Summoning my courage, I held the artifacts high and continued the incantation. The spirit screamed in rage, its form writhing and contorting as if being torn apart. With a final, ear-piercing shriek, it vanished, and the room was filled with a blinding light. When the light faded, I found myself back in the parlor. The portraits of the Hawthorn family had changed. Their faces now looked peaceful, their expressions serene. I knew I had succeeded in freeing their souls. Exhausted but relieved, I left the manor and returned to town. The story of the Hawthorn family and the bravery of the historian who freed them from their curse became a local legend. But I knew the truth, that sometimes the past can reach out from the shadows and that the line between the living and the dead is thinner than we dare to believe.